Season 1, Episode 2, The Accountant Who Hid the Truth for 8 Years. Every business has a story. Some end in success, others become lessons. This is one of those lessons. Welcome to What Happened at Work. I'm William Prescott Harrington III. Over the past 40 years, I've bought companies, sold businesses, advised executives, and helped owners through some of the most difficult moments of their professional lives. Some of these stories happened to me. Others happened to trusted friends whose identities deserve to remain private. Every story is inspired by real business events. Names, companies, locations, and identifying details have been changed while preserving the lessons, because after 4 decades in business, I've learned something. Sometimes the greatest danger to a company isn't theft, it isn't competition, it isn't even a recession. Sometimes it's one mistake that nobody's willing to admit. Today's story began with a bank that refused to release payroll. It was a Thursday afternoon when I received a call from a man named Charles. His company manufactured industrial components for the construction industry. The business had been operating for nearly 25 years, 160 employees, a loyal customer base, consistent profits. On paper, it was exactly the kind of company every investor hopes to find, but Charles wasn't calling to celebrate. His first words were simple. "Bill, my bank says I don't have enough cash to make payroll." That sentence didn't make sense. I had reviewed enough businesses to know the warning signs. Companies don't usually go from healthy to broke overnight. Something always happens first. The question is whether anyone notices. I asked Charles a question. "When did you first realize something was wrong?" He answered almost immediately. I didn't. The bank did. By the following morning, I was sitting across from Charles in his office. Stacks of financial reports covered the conference table, income statements, balance sheets, cash flow reports, tax returns. Everything looked surprisingly healthy. Revenue had increased almost every year. Profits appeared steady. Debt levels seemed reasonable. If someone had handed me those reports without any context, I would have told them the business was thriving, yet payroll couldn't be funded. That contradiction bothered me. The company's controller entered the room a few moments later. Her name was Linda. She had worked there for nearly 18 years. Quiet, professional, highly respected. Charles introduced her with obvious confidence. "If anyone knows these numbers," he said, "it's Linda." She smiled politely. Then she handed me another stack of reports. "Everything is in there," she said. "I've already highlighted the important items." I thanked her, but I didn't open the folder. Instead, I asked a question that caught both of them off guard. "Who prepares the monthly financial statements?" Linda answered, "I do." "Who reviews them before they're distributed?" "I do." "Who reconciles the bank accounts?" "I do." "Who communicates with the outside accountant?" "I do." Charles laughed. "She's been doing all of it for years." Linda smiled again. "I know where everything is." Most business owners would have found that reassuring. I didn't, because after years of investigating struggling companies, I'd learned something. When one person controls every step of a financial process, mistakes become invisible. Not because people are dishonest, because nobody else is looking. I spent the rest of the morning asking questions that had nothing to do with accounting. Who approves purchases? Who signs checks? Who negotiates with vendors? Who authorizes write-offs? Who has access to online banking? The answers kept leading back to one person, Linda. She wasn't just managing the books, she had become the books. By lunchtime, Charles finally leaned back in his chair. "Bill, I need you to tell me the truth. Are we being robbed?" I looked at the reports one more time, then I answered, "I don't think someone stole your money." He frowned. "I think someone stole your reality." Charles looked at me without speaking. I slid the income statement across the table. "These reports tell me your company has been making money for years." I placed the bank statement beside it. "This tells me you're running out of cash." I pointed to both documents. "They cannot both be telling the truth." That's when Linda quietly excused herself to refill her coffee. As the conference room door closed behind her, Charles lowered his voice. "I've trusted her for almost 2 decades. I nodded. "I know. And that's exactly why we're going to verify everything." The next 48 hours would uncover a chain of decisions that began with one innocent mistake, a mistake that nobody had the courage to admit. And every month after that, and the lie became more expensive. Charles and I began with the oldest records we could find, not because I believed the answer was there, but because problems like this rarely begin where people think they do. They begin years earlier, quietly, patiently, almost invisibly. For 2 days, we compared financial statements to bank deposits, purchase orders to invoices, invoices to payments, payments to inventory. Everything matched, at least it appeared to. Late that second afternoon, I noticed something strange. Every December, inventory increased dramatically, not by a little, by millions of dollars. Then every January, it suddenly dropped back to normal, I asked Charles a simple question. Do you stock up every December? He shook his head. No. Our inventory stays pretty consistent all year. I turned toward Linda. She answered before I asked. It's year-end adjustments. I smiled politely. What kind of adjustments? She hesitated. The accountant recommended them years ago. That answer bothered me, not because it was impossible, because it was incomplete. I asked another question. Which accountant? She named a firm that had retired nearly 6 years earlier. Interesting. The adjustments had continued. The accountant had not. I made a note. Never argue with people. Let the documents do the talking. The following morning, I requested warehouse inventory reports instead of accounting reports. The warehouse manager looked confused. We've never been asked for these before. That's all right, I said. Let's just compare them. Within an hour, another pattern emerged. The warehouse always reported fewer products than accounting. Not dramatically, just enough. Small differences until you add them together. Over 8 years, those small differences represented millions of dollars. Charles stared at the reports. I don't understand. The products were sold. The money came in. So where did it go? I looked up. The money went exactly where it was supposed to. The inventory didn't. Silence. Linda quietly folded her hands. For the first time, she looked nervous. I continued. Inventory was being adjusted, but not because inventory changed, because the financial statements needed it to change. Charles looked confused. Why would anyone do that? I answered carefully. Because once you make one accounting mistake, you have two choices. Correct it or hide it. If you hide it, next month you have to hide it again. And eventually, you're no longer fixing a mistake. You're protecting a story. Nobody spoke. The room had become very quiet. That afternoon, I asked Linda to walk me through the very first adjustment. She opened a file cabinet, removed an old binder, blew the dust from the cover 8 years earlier. The mistake wasn't fraud. It wasn't theft. It wasn't greed. It was fear. A major customer had declared bankruptcy, nearly $1 million gone. The company should have recorded the loss immediately. Instead, Linda convinced herself it would all work out, so she delayed recording the loss. Just 1 month, then another. By year end, the numbers no longer balanced. Instead of admitting the mistake, she adjusted inventory, just temporarily. At least that was the plan. But temporary solutions have a way of becoming permanent habits. Every year after that, another adjustment, then another, then another. Not to steal money, to protect a decision she no longer knew how to explain. Charles leaned back in his chair. He wasn't angry. He looked heartbroken. After nearly a minute, he finally spoke. You mean we weren't profitable? I answered honestly. You were, but not as profitable as your reports claimed. He swallowed hard. And the bank? They've been making lending decisions based on inaccurate statements. Charles slowly removed his glasses, rubbed his eyes, then whispered something I'll never forget. 8 years, all because nobody wanted to admit they were wrong. The hardest conversation was still ahead. The next morning, Charles asked Linda to join us one last time in the conference room. No attorneys, no auditors, just the three of us. The atmosphere felt different, not hostile, heavy. On the table sat a single binder. Inside were copies of every adjustment made over the previous 8 years. Each one told part of the story. Charles spoke first. His voice was calm. Linda, I've worked beside you for 18 years. You've been to company picnics. You've watched my children grow up. I trusted you. Linda's eyes filled with tears. I know. Charles looked down at the binder. I need to hear it from you. What happened? For several moments, she couldn't speak. Finally, she took a deep breath. It started with one decision. I truly believed I was protecting the company. When that customer filed bankruptcy, I thought if I could buy us a little time, they'd recover. We'd collect something. The numbers would fix themselves. She paused. But they never did. So I made another adjustment, and then another. Every month I told myself, next month I'll fix everything, but next month never came. The room fell silent. There was no anger, only disappointment. I finally asked the question that had been on my mind. Linda, why didn't you tell Charles? She looked at him. Because every year it became harder. I was afraid of losing his respect. Charles closed his eyes, then quietly replied, You lost it the day you stopped telling me the truth. No one moved. Sometimes the quietest moments hurt the most. Linda nodded. I know, I've known for years. She reached into her purse, pulled out an envelope, and slid it across the table. Inside was her resignation letter, already signed, already dated. Charles didn't touch it. Instead, he asked one final question. If you could go back, what would you do differently? Linda answered without hesitation. I would tell you the truth the first day. Another long silence filled the room. I finally spoke. Every business owner watching this should remember something. Very few companies are destroyed by one bad decision. They're destroyed by years of protecting one bad decision. That afternoon, Charles called the bank himself. He didn't wait. He told them exactly what had happened. The conversation lasted nearly 2 hours. When he hung up, he looked relieved. Not because the problem had disappeared, because the hiding had. Over the next 6 months, the company restated its financial statements. The bank renewed its lending agreement. Financial responsibilities were divided among multiple employees. The company survived. Several years later, I visited Charles again. The business was profitable. Employees were thriving. New equipment filled the warehouse. As we walked through the plant, he smiled. Bill, you know the strange part? We almost lost this company. Not because someone stole money, but because someone was too afraid to admit they made a mistake. He was exactly right. Before we finish, let me leave you with 5 lessons from this story. First, mistakes are inevitable. Cover-ups are optional. Second, separate financial responsibilities whenever possible. Trust your people, but build systems that protect everyone. Third, small accounting adjustments deserve big questions, especially if they happen repeatedly. Fourth, the longer a mistake stays hidden, the more expensive it becomes. And finally, the strongest leaders I've ever known weren't the ones who never made mistakes. They were the ones willing to admit them early. Business isn't built on perfect decisions, it's built on honest ones. If today's story made you think differently about leadership, accountability, or financial controls, I'd be honored if you'd subscribe to What Happened at Work. Leave a comment below. Have you ever seen a small mistake become a much bigger problem because no one wanted to admit it? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, watch the people, watch the numbers, and never ignore the warning signs. Remember, the most dangerous lie in business isn't the one you tell someone else. It's the one you keep telling yourself.